Welcome to the Building Doctor Show with Jens Johansson.
Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Building Doctor Show. I'm your host, Jens Johansson. Glad to see you here to learn more about your buildings. Today, we're going to talk about inspections and insurance company required inspections. Whether you are getting a new policy from an insurance company or you've been with them forever and you're doing a renewal, why do they want an inspection now? So today we're going to walk you through why this is happening and how these inspections can actually become a powerful tool to help you boost your property values and boost your long-term maintenance and things like that. So thank you for joining us. This is the live version, the Building Doctor Show Live, that allows you to ask your Q&As. If you're watching us on the podcasts or YouTube today, thanks for listening. Enter your questions and comments there. We'll be sure to get back to you, but we encourage everyone to watch the live if you can. And we encourage all of those of you who are attending live today, if you've got some good questions, ask them in the Q&A because they help steer the show. And so the chat is for putting out little links to documents and things like that. But anyway, we can help you in that live Q&A. And then if you have more specific questions, stay tuned. You'll find a link to talk to one of our building doctors, and you can QR code that, etc. So please remember, this show is for educational content only. We are not giving financial, legal, or engineering advice. Okay, so like we said, the agenda today, insurance companies are now requiring inspections. So we've seen 3 different companies in the past 30 days say, here's the list. You have to give us an inspection report on these different topics. And these lists vary. You know, one company is pretty strict. The other 2 are pretty, I wouldn't say mellow, but they're pretty generic, if you will. So we're going to cover why we think they're doing this. And we're also going to talk to you about, the typical insurance policies typically exclude repairs or coverage for things like maintenance, mold, or rot, or they have limitations on mold. So you may have a giant mold claim, but they've got it capped at $5,000. And so they're fairly commonly known. You'll see them in the exclusions in your policy. And so, it's a new requirement. Nobody likes requirements. This is actually a good one in the end, because a better maintained property has higher values and you're staying on top of things. You're not getting surprised. And so we will also help you interpret what these additional lists mean. Do I have to have an engineer? Do I have to have a mechanical specialist come out and do this stuff? So we'll kind of walk through some of these things. So like I said, just, we've seen them over the past 6 months, onesie, twosie, but in the last 30 days, we've seen four different big companies all have their list. And we're getting these requests from our clients saying, whoa, I need an insurance inspection so that I can get renewal. So we'll also talk about some action items you can take. And that's one of them is delays. If you wait until the last minute, or if this comes out of left field kind of right before renewal, it can take a while to get an inspection done and things like that. So anyway, why are they doing it? So here's a beautiful bar chart, but it goes 2018, 2019, 2020. What this bar chart says is this is based off the Palisades fire. And this study comes from Harvard and the Joint Center for Housing Studies. So you can look this up. You can Google this, Harvard University Joint Center for Housing Studies, insurance non-renewal rates in fire-prone areas. And what they talked about was 2 signs of, they call it instability in private residential insurance markets, are sharply rising insurance premiums and sharply rising non-renewal rates. And so this evidence comes from also a federal, where does it say there? Well, it says in my notes, the Federal Insurance Office, FIO report that shows premiums went up 9% above inflation between 2018 and 2022. And this is tracking the decline or the non-renewal rate. percentage of policies not renewed due to risk profile of property or area. And this has to do, the yellow is the Palisades zip code. And the Palisades fire was in January 2025. Over 11,000 homes were totally destroyed. $53 billion in damage. And the insurance company's been tracking this since 2019. And so they've been saying, wait a second, something's going to happen here. So you can see in 2019, they have over a 3%. They're just not renewing 3% of the policies. And then almost two, over two, and then drop back down to two. So it's really weird. They were tracking this zip code for 5 years prior and not renewing. And so they were tracking fire risk and wildfire risk specifically. So here's what's going to happen in, kind of the next thing of condos and HOA risk. We have maintenance, we have claims or things like that. So my personal opinion is they're bringing this over in more of their risk management, and they're saying, hey, this is risky. So let's start tracking some of these. Let's make you have an inspection done, because some of these properties we see, and we'll go through some photos, are pretty wild in the sense of you guys haven't done anything for a long time. And so the insurance companies are saying, give me a report, give me something that shows this, that we can base you as a good, healthy risk to insuring you. So wildfires, they were tracking for years. It's coming to condos now. So another interesting thing, you can see the black line is nationwide total. Nationwide's at 1%, kind of across the board. California was kind of hovering around that, but in the Pacific Palisades, you're 300 times that, so 3x of the nationwide. Okay, so wildfires, 53 billion. We gotta recoup something. So the requirements now, in the past 30 days, we've seen State Farm, Allstate, Progressive, and they're requiring this at renewal time, but we're also seeing it at new time. So this means if you're insurance shopping and, hey, I'd like to get a bid, my rates went up because we saw the rates rising in that last slide. Let's go get another bid. And then they're saying, okay, we want an inspection report. So this isn't just suggestions coming from your manager or consultant anymore. It's now becoming a requirement for coverage renewal. That's a proactive move by insurers in response to one, I think, aging buildings. The older it gets, the more damage and exposure it has. And so it'd be interesting actually to see their non-renewal rates on the older buildings. But so we've got older buildings, we got increased claims and losses, we've got lack of prior inspection reports. That's one of the things we ask every board client of who else has been out of your property. Let's see the old reports. And well, of course we can't find them. And the file history is a mess. So, okay, well, we'll go out, fresh set of eyes, and take a look around. Then I think the insurance company also got a little feedback of they used to send drones to do drone surveys. This was about 2 years ago, where they would just hire a drone operator, fly over the building, zoom in on some things, and people started complaining, what's that happening out there? And but when we look at the requirements, you'll see they're pretty similar to VA, Veterans Administration, or FHA loan and mortgage requirements. Check this, check this, check this, and then we'll write a loan on it. And so they're not that far off the line, but the insurance company's doing it, not just banking. So not universal yet, but we're seeing enough of a trend that it's time to start talking about it. Okay, so understanding the requirements, we talked about the building inspections. They're also looking to avoid undetected issues that may lead to damage, and so that's under that first benefit there. Identify when things are small. When you can catch them when they're small, it's less expensive, and so catch those things now, and at least the insurance company will have a record of, hey, that report a couple of years ago identified this. And 2 or 3 years from now, when there's some kind of claim about it, again, it gives them some history to say, I don't like that, or I'm going to raise your rates. But number 2, here's the big shift. So it's the required attention to maintenance. And so we saw this back in 2023 with Fannie Mae mortgage requirements from the 2021 condominium Florida collapse, and where the banks or the mortgages on all these units were expecting it to be rebuilt, but there was such a catastrophic collapse that all the banks lost their funds. There was nothing to rebuild, and the insurance ran out. So you have a situation where it's not necessarily building department or other laws or other. You'll see some kind of requirements to have a reserve study in the state, but there's usually a loophole unless they can't quite afford it. So this is the laws are one thing. The vendors in these insurance and banking, the vendors in these industries have said, we're not going to renew you. We're not going to renew you if you don't do this. And so it's actually, I find it an interesting thing where, if the laws can't do it, the industry can. And so it's common and they're going to do it. So the benefit of this is it actually helps keep your building in good shape and catch issues whether they're small, like I said. But these inspections can actually be a nice baseline and help you with other liability issues. Hey, that got fixed, or that didn't look like that last year. Who did this? We talked a little bit about that in a previous episode about security monitoring. But you get some of these baselines. And so staying on top of this, you can avoid delays in renewals. And maybe, I'm not the insurance company, but I can see them offering potential deductibles. Like if your home and auto are with us, you get a deduction. If you have alarms and locks and fire sprinklers, you get a deduction. Maybe I get a deduction if I'm keeping my building in good shape. Maybe I get a deduction if I can prove that I've had an inspection report. And so look for that stuff. And let's see, avoiding delays in renewal. Some of the delays we see are my policy expires at the end of the month. I've got a week and I'm supposed to get this done. Takes a week or two to get an investigation rolling and a week or two to get a report back. So that's a month. And then, of course, if that inspection identifies anything, they're going to say, well, make sure you fix that. And if you fix this, we will renew you. So then you might have a little bit of delay for getting that actual work done. So we've worked through some of these requirements by providing a letter to the insurance company saying, hey, we're the engineer looking over this work. There is a plan in place. It is being enacted, but it won't be done by the end of the month. Can you make some leeway there? So anyway, those are some things to think about on that. Okay, here's the stuff we see. This is going to be fun. The next dozen slides or so, you're going to be like, wow, that's what you guys see every day. And so it's the interior, it's your living room. Granted, there were some curtains here, maybe covering this area, but they've got mushrooms growing out of their windows, growing out of their trim. Their base trim is hammered. The flooring's hammered. This trim and slider or window or whatever it is leaks like a sieve. So I wouldn't insure that, or I would want that fixed, right? And you always get lots of moss and vegetation growing at the top of trim. There's no head flashing above the trim. It's above the window, but in this instance, it's like I got plants growing out my building. In this one, I've got mushrooms growing out of my siding. Doesn't look good. Here's looking down on a shingle roof. You can kind of see the shingles over here. You don't see the shingles over on this half. And you've got lots of moss, you've got ivy, you've got all sorts of things growing up in there. Here's looking at the side view of some siding. You can see the big old bow and warpage into there. This was a big bee's nest that was under their siding, causing this giant bowing of siding. And the good old pour concrete steps up and over the cladding. Just cover the siding with concrete because, we need steps there. So there's no flashing, the water just runs down and gets trapped back in there. And not to mention they're black and slimy and slippery. So that doesn't look very safe. Trim and siding visibly rotting off. You can see that damage. And more roofs. This actually kind of looks like a moss farm. Just a little bit of moss. Yeah, that up here, I'm not too worried about it, but where it's starting to take over the whole shingle, the moss root can actually penetrate through the shingle and get down into the substrate. So that's why we want to clean that off. But this is under a little porch or a little cover. It's hard to get to. It takes a little extra work to get there. And of course, inside parking garages, looking up and seeing the white efflorescence, the water coming through the slab. And this is, number 24 of this instant. Similar, where's that water coming from? Well, probably coming because the slab slopes right into the wall, and there's a little bit of paint on this wall, but there's no paint there. So we've got leaking plaza decks and garage slabs, and water and concrete don't get along. This is a good one. I love dogs. I'm a dog guy. Doesn't he look friendly? Well, he's peeing so much on the deck that his, uric acid is rusting out the flashings and rusting out the guardrails. Look at the spalling of these guardrails, and it's almost eating through that lower. So this spalling is when the concrete just rusts and delaminates. And he's so cute, but not letting your dog out will rust your flashings off. And more mossy roofs, but we start getting a lot of that. But another thing that we look on roof attic ventilation. So drones are great here. This is a good drone shot. But you can see the high venting. There's a little bit of venting here, kind of halfway up, There's no real good ventilation of this gable roof, and so it's very difficult. This area isn't. This roof and this roof aren't ventilated, and so where is your proper ventilation to let that warm air out of the attic? And with a visual inspection, I can see that. More mossy roofs. Yeah, everybody's seen lots of that. Here's some brick. We've got a tree touching it. We've got moss from the tree in the shade just kind of growing onto the brick. But when you look close at the brick is cracked. The mortar is toothing, we call it. Needs to be, what's it called? You can see the mortar's been repacked right in here, but they didn't do the sills. And so, yeah, we should probably look at that. That one needs a little bit of work to remain watertight. Here's planter edge detail. Maybe a little bit dirty, but we've got all sorts of sealant goop here. Why do we need this, and why is it spackled on so thick? And so these are things we're looking at. And again, a maintenance clean job would wash this away. I'm not too worried about the moss penetrating this, but eventually we got to keep this in check and keep this cleaned off. Here's looking down on the deck, a little bit of deck membrane with a mixed in wood deck with plants all over it, moss all over it, topsoil all over it. This isn't helping the deck at all. And the classic, I've got ivy growing out of my siding. And this is wood siding. So it's, maybe it's vinyl. Hard to tell. Maybe it's vinyl. But so in other words, you have a little more gap there. But if I've got vines and trees growing out of my siding, that's probably not a good thing. Mossy deck, support beams, the brackets are, it's not all that dramatic. I'm missing brackets, but they're not that tall. But this is the one I'm more concerned with. We have some spalling at the concrete stairwell with some rebar exposed, with obviously a patch or a shoring post up there. So how long is that going to stay? Here's our documentation baseline, January 2020. Here's the photo, and it's still like that. Guys, you can't have a building on crutches. So it's been 5 years. Get it fixed. So, and then this is drains it. This is a drain underneath a hot tub. The chlorine and the salts are wreaking havoc on the sealants and the concrete and steel reinforcing. So we've got all sorts of rust and brown staining and goop coming out of here. So yeah, I would flag that and say, what's going on? Why do you have so much water leakage? Is your hot tub leaking, or is this just oversplash, or something to look into? And of course, the wooden stairwells with the wooden rails, they're always a problem. They get pretty chunky. And I think we have a video. Oh yeah. So when we push on the membrane, the water squirts out. It's kind of like clams down the low tide. And so this is a paver deck syndrome, paver deck, plaza deck, and you've got the paver pedestal, and you've got probably protection board, but underneath there, clearly your water is squirting out. That was so good. I'm gonna play it again. Yeah. Yum. I think the inspector got some on him. Let's see. Let's go to the next one. Another video. Here's a stucco wall. Whatever that coating is, you can see the blistering all over the base of wall. And we can see the paint blisters and bubbles here. Oh, yeah, you can pick it and pop it off that blister. So peeling paint, yeah, but if you don't get on top of that, you'll have rotten boards. So if any one of us were an insurance company, I think we'd want all this stuff. Hey, if I'm going to insure this thing for risk, I want you guys to make sure that that's in good shape. So now let's talk about what they're requiring you to do and then how you can respond. Okay, so State Farm as one of the more stricter ones, I would call it. And so we start with the structural element, and these are the inspection lists that the inspector is supposed to go through and put in their report. So any evidence of sagging, bowing of the structure, and construction of visible foundation, floors, walls, ceiling, stairs, drainage systems, and window alignment. Wow, that's kind of a mouthful. But any evidence of sagging or bowing of the structure, how do I see the structure? I have to pull some of the cladding off, right? So I'm going to take you forward a slide. Here's the deck. We noticed that the siding was kind of askew here a little bit. Here's the siding was fine. And then we pull off the siding, and we had to shore it immediately. There's no post. There was one post right there, but there's no post holding this stuff up. So this is our temporary post saying, do not go on that deck. There's nothing left of the beam. So that's what we mean about invasive inspection versus visual. Visual, I can look and say, your siding's crooked. But if I'm the inspector and I'm trying to write a report that says bowing of the structure, well, if you want me to look at the structure, let me pull off some siding. So any kind of safety stuff, talked about sprinklers, grounds, that's drainage and fences and sidewalks. Roof, we saw a lot of mossy roofs, right? So condition of shingles, flashing, vents, clear vents, and properly working gutters. There's surfaces that's keeping ground contact away from the siding, like those concrete stairs poured up against the siding. Attic, we got to get up inside the attic to determine sufficient insulation, proper ventilation, any signs of leaking, water damage. This is the bottom side of that sheathing, scuzzy and black. And so as I'm the inspector, I'm going through this saying, in order to determine if there's any structural elements, I have to at least give some kind of sampling size. So I got to do 3 to 5 openings and extrapolate based upon that. Same with attic. I got to get up into 3 to 5 attics, and that's going to be most of the attics have a little attic access hatch in the master bedroom. So it's going to be knock, knock, knock. I need to get up in here. So there's a little bit of, it's not just a drive-by. It's not just we'll send a drone up and we'll give you a report. We'll drive by in our truck and say everything looks fine, because there's a little bit more here. So interior plumbing, electrical systems, appliances, heating and cooling. These are, up to code and type of visible wiring. They're not making you pull off the drywall, but they are saying where you see it coming out of the panel or where you see it. Is it the right kind of wire? Let's look at our electrical panels. Are they 50-year-old Zinsco panels that have a track record of lighting on fire, or has it been upgraded, or does it, how old does it look, and does it look to be in good shape? Do things work? So this is the water heater, the fireplace, things like that. And then ventilation. Did vent fans work? So these are more a little bit of home inspection stuff. Somebody's running around testing circuits and turning things on and off. But the structural elements, the attic, and some of the exterior conditions and even roof are a little bit higher level. We got to get in there and we got to look around. And so, yeah. Now let's look at. That's what I showed you. So then we go to progressive, and so it has real general conditions, but again, to find the rot, decay, or water damage, so they had 6 elements here, and the inspector may zero in on. I'm always watching may, should versus shall. Okay, so how do I find water damage? Well, back to that deck picture. I got to pull off a little bit. How do I find rot or decay? Typically, I'm pulling off some siding. Now, we did see some photos of like your siding is rotting off. Animal or insect infestation. We didn't know that Boeing siding was a bee's nest until we pulled it down. Mold and mildew. Inadequate ventilation. Again, I need to get up in the attic or down in the crawl space and determine what's happening. So this one's a little bit easier. The inspector may verify. So there's not a bunch of shalls in there. And so then Allstate comes out with an interior and an exterior. So this is the exterior. And what I find fun is they cite a few home inspection standards. So NACHI, American's ASHI, and then they do some EPA stuff, but they also cite Bob Vila. So, this old house. And I was like, Bob Vila's TV show made it to the insurance company standards for inspections. But anyway, in the Allstate exterior one, they want to look at roof. They want to check for decay around the windows. They want to look inside and outside the foundation. Well, they also reference Zillow. And so Zillow recommends this and that. So yeah, some interesting little things. So, and here's the interior. They want you to go through the interior and look at all these things as well. And they include basement and foundation in the interior. But again, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, basically run the faucet. You guys are going to tell us about electrical problems you have. And so this particular circuit doesn't work, or these particular things don't, work right, and they should. So then we'll focus our inspections on that. But so you can see the differences, and you can see, depending on what they're asking for, we either have to do a visual or a small invasive, and maybe you might have some old reports that satisfies some of this stuff. So, another one that's common, and as of 2018, State Farm now requires what they call the 4-point inspection, which is roof, electrical, plumbing, and HVAC. And their commentary were, while some companies were allowing a home to be 30 or 50 years old before requiring this, others are requiring it for brand new homes, or if they've been vacant, or State Farm now requires it for any property that's over 10 years. So you can see they're starting to set these mile markers. They want to at least know about the roof and these main systems. And so it's, to me, interesting, the differences. So we talked about kind of structural integrity, and the first two were, hey, tell me about any framing or structure, and tell me about any concrete or foundation issues. And so they want to look for, bigger picture items. And then exterior, we want to make sure the roof, siding, windows is all working well, because that sheds the water, including decks and balconies. And then, the roof has its own thing. So, and any signs of any leaks or water damage. So sometimes interior leaks, especially on a sloped roof, interior leaks may show up in the interior. A lot of times they enter through the roof, and you don't see them until they run all the way down to the eaves and maybe even drip out the side. And then plumbing, electrical, mechanical, it looks like they're mostly asking for, can somebody with an educated eye take a look at it? They have not required that a licensed electrician take out their fancy tools and test the electrical system. They are saying, make sure things work, look for any anomalies, and then report back. And obviously, if something doesn't work, you'll want to call those licensed professionals to do that. But as far as the inspection goes, it doesn't seem that they're requiring a licensed plumber to briefly look for leaking pipes and or corrosion or proper function, things like that. Be on the lookout for that. And then interior elements. Some are asking for interior, others aren't. So that's kind of the differences. We don't see a standard yet. And this is again coming from the industry, not code or law. So one company can ask for this, another company asks for that. Safety features, carbon monoxide detectors, smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, and things like that are fairly routine and common. Pest infestations. We only saw one of them asking for that. That's more covered on the home inspection report. But again, home inspectors are focused on Unit 301, and they're not focused on the whole building, right? And so getting somebody into the crawl space to look around for that'd be good. The code compliance, there was one phrase, ensuring that the building complies with all codes and regulations. That's going to be a pretty tough requirement to do. It's going to be, I'm not going to remove all the siding off your building. I'm not going to remove all your roofing to determine if your roof is code compliant. So the inspection industry runs on kind of extrapolation, and we can say we did a small, 3 to 5 openings, and we verified that things were either right or wrong. And for the most part, it's our opinion that, in general, conformance with the codes. But it would be, I don't think you're going to find an engineer that said this building is free of all potential defects without a pretty extensive investigation. So just kind of watch for that language. If they want us to say the building has no code violations or code anomalies, that'd be a pretty extensive thing. And it'd be interesting in their risk shifting. Well, 5 years ago, you said there was no code violation, and then we found one, so you're liable. So interesting risk shifting exercise. Okay, so we talked about visual, kind of surface level. I would call that annual checkups. Kind of visual, maybe we had, maybe the reserve study guy is doing that. Maybe a building envelope visual inspection is doing that. Maybe a contractor who's on top of the maintenance game is doing that for you. So then the invasive inspection, a little bit of siding removal to see the structural framing, detect hidden damage. I would perform that, every 3 years, kind of, or on an as needed basis. Or if you're coupling it with a big reserve study update or a planned project or following up on defects and repairs that you think you might have. So what I'm getting at is some of these inspections may have some overlap for you. And so, you just had a big building envelope inspection done last year, and then the insurance company comes to you and says, hey, we need this inspection to make sure you're okay. You can give that report to them, or you could slightly modify it by calling us back and saying, hey, can you look at the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing that wasn't caught in your building envelope report, but I think for a small amount more, we can add that. So we'll get into that in a little bit, but inspections are happening for a variety of reasons. So let's get you bang for the buck and try to get 2 birds with 1 stone, so to speak. In Washington, finding hidden damage early can trigger insurance coverage for repairs. So we would want to find that hidden damage and get the insurance policy to pay for it. And maybe that's some of this language that's saying we want to make sure we don't have to pay out on those things. So we want you to do this type of inspection. So it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. But again, we can see the insurance companies coming back, taking a pounding from fire damage or taking a pounding from Florida storm damage, saying we don't need any more poundings. Let's try to risk manage what we're doing here. So we talked about general inspections. The common problem areas are attic, ventilation, and insulation. And so those are hard to balance out, and they're hard to get right due to a variety of factors. But we can help you sort through that. Okay, so how do these inspections help? Why is it good news? And so it's, if you haven't had an inspection done in a long time, it's a good in-depth assessment of the property's condition. Covers a wide variety of components and systems, generates those, hey, we do need to fix that. Let's get it on the list. Let's get this going. And I think the baseline things are pretty important. Here's a report we had done last year, and the decks look great, but after your tenant moved out, they were trashed. And so kind of helps in this, how did this damage happen? Or let's catch that slippery walkway before it leads to a slip and fall lawsuit and we get blamed for all this stuff. It helps the board, in defending their position of, look, we have all these inspections. We've had 7 inspections done in the past 10 years. That's nearly 1 per year. We're staying on top of our top of our game. We're keeping the building in good repair. And then well inspected and well maintained buildings are, of course, worth more. They help, like we said, uncover small issues before they become big costs. Properties that are well maintained and documented tend to retain their value more. You've got long-term benefit, more informed boards and better protected buildings. And you've got that baseline report to document improved conditions. So here's what you need to do. Let's get after our maintenance plans and inspection records that we've had done for the past 5 to 10 years. So organize these documents, find the inspection reports, find the repair records, find the reserve studies, find any past claims, spread all that stuff out on the table, dust it off, shake it off, and start saying, here's really reports that would help us with that. The insurance renewal request just came in. So they're wanting a report on this. Well, here's a report from a year ago. Here's another report from 2 years ago. And then maybe packaging some of that stuff and sending it in and, see if it counts. Sometimes these are, check the box sort of things on the insurance company's behalf, and you send them some reports and they're good and they issue your policy. Other times they're like, this didn't satisfy item 8 on that list and we need to finish that. Okay, that's fine. So see if you can reuse some of that stuff. But bottom line, we'll have that. And if you find out you haven't had any, or your reserve study is 15 years old and we don't have any of that stuff, it's time to kind of jump on that and get those up to date. And then you'll be ready for what we've done, or you'll be ready when you get this requirement coming in. So I would say set a 2. You can find this year's policy and see it expires in December. So put yourself a calendar reminder for October for the board meeting agenda. Take a look at it. You got 2 months to kind of, are we going to get it with a renewal? Well, you'll get it in the mail. Might be last minute, but you'll at least get it and you'll be able to start planning for it. Do we have a report on file? Do we have an existing thing we can use? Do we get preemptive about it and just do a building envelope inspection right now, or an annual inspection that'll cover all these things, typically except the MEP, unless you want that done. And so, as a few of these things have come up this past month, it's basically a building envelope inspection. We're checking the foundations, roofs, walls, gutters, windows, a sampling of all these things. And then this one requires look at the electric panels and what do we have to do with them? We just got to make sure there's no burn marks. We got to take a picture of the panel. We got to submit that. We got to make sure it's not on the panel naughty list. We said, yeah, we can look at 5 panels and it's only a couple $100 more to do that. And so you really get a bang for your buck and kind of thinking about what we've done, what we haven't done, and can we prove this? So set a timer, look at your old stuff, see if you can reuse old stuff. If you can't reuse it, get that visual done and or even reach out. Maybe you'd want to reach out to hey, are you going to be requiring an inspection at renewal time? We want to stay on top of this. So we talked about, takes 2 to 4 weeks to get a report back from the inspection. And it may take 2 months to do the repairs that are identified in that if you find stuff. And so we've worked with a few boards that are right on the edge of, we're going to get canceled. And we've gone out for renewal. We can't find anybody competing because the insurance company all shares this. I think it's called the Clue report, and they can tell if you've had a policy before and why you were denied or why you weren't renewed, and they share all that information. It's not as private market as you think. So let's not get in that undue stress situation. So, all right. Hey, need an inspection? If for those of you who like to type, you can go to learn.j2consultants.com, consultant on call, or you can use your little QR code and scan that QR thing. So we can talk to you about these particular topics. We can go more in depth about it. We will gladly review your little letter from your insurance company for free and say, yep, here's what you need to do. Here's what I would be worried about, or here's what would change our investigation for you to satisfy this stuff. So give us a call and we'll walk you through that.
This podcast is part of J2's free live webinar, The Building Doctor Show. To attend the live show and ask your questions during the Q&A, visit www.j2consultants.com.